صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والشمس وضحاها والقمر إذا تلاها والنهار إذا جلاها والليل إذا يغشاها والسماء وما بناها والأرض وما طحاها ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها قد أفلح من زكاها وقد خاب من دساها كذبت ثمود بطغواها إذ انبعث أشقاها فقال لهم رسول الله ناقة الله وسقياها فكذبوه فعقروها فدمدم عليهم ربهم بذنبهم فسواها ولا يخاف عقباها. صلوات.
Like to invite Yasin to recite Hadith. صلوات.
صلوات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. عن جابر عبد الله الأنصاري أنه قال عن فاطمة الزهراء عليه السلام بنت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله قال سمعت فاطمة أنها قالت دخل علي أبي رسول الله في بعض الأيام فقال سك يا فاطمة فقلت عليك السلام قال إني أجد في بدني ضعفا فقلت له أريدك بالله يا أبتاه من الضعف فقال يا فاطمة ائتيني بالكساء اليماني وغادر به فأتيته بالكساء اليماني فأتيته به وصرت أنظر إليه وإذا وجهه يتلألأ كأنه البدر في ليلة تمامه وكماله فما كان إذا بولد الحسن قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه فقلت عليك السلام يا قرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال يا أماه إني أشم عندك راية طيبة كهنا رأيت جدي رسول الله فقلت نعم إن جدك تحت الكسائي فقال أقبل الحسن نحو الكسائي وقال السلام عليك يا جداه يا رسول الله تأذن لي أن أدخل معك تحت الكسائي فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا صاحب عودي قد أذنت لك معه تحت الكسائي فما كانت إلا ساعة إذا بولد الحسين قد أقبل وقال السلام عليك يا أماه فعليك السلام يا ولدي ويا كرة عيني وثمرة فؤادي فقال لي يا أماه إني أشم عندك راية طيبة كأنه رأيت جدي رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله فقال إن جدك وخاك تحت الكسائي فدنا الحسين نحو الكسائي والسلام عليك يا جداه السلام عليك من اختار الله أتأذن لي أن أكون معكما تحت الكسائي فقال وعليك السلام يا ولدي شايف أمتي قد أذنت لك. فدخل معهما تحت الكساء. قبل عند ذلك الأب الحسن علي بن أبي طالب وقال السلام عليك يا بنت رسول الله. فقلت وعليك السلام يا أبا الحسن ويا أمير المؤمنين. فقال يا فاطمة إني أشم عندك راية طيبة كأنها رأس أخي وابن عمي رسول الله. فقلت نعم ها هو مع ولديك تحت الكساء. أقبل علي نحو الكساء وقال السلام عليك يا الله تأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال له وعليه السلام ويا أخي وسي خليفة صاحب اللواء كذنت لك. فدخل علي تحت الكساء ثم الكساء وقلت السلام عليك يا أبتاه يا رسول الله تأذن لي أن أكون معكم تحت الكساء. قال وعليك السلام يا بنتي ويا بدعتي كذنت لك. فدخلت تحت الكساء واحتملنا جميعا تحت الكساء. أخذ بي رسول الله بطرف الكساء وأومأ بيده اليمنى إلى السماء قال اللهم إن هؤلاء الخمسة أهل البيت وخاصتي وهمتي دمهم دمي ودمهم دمي يلمني ما يلمهم ويزنني ما يزنهم نهرب لمن هاربهم وسلم لمن سالمهم وعدوا لمن عادهم ومحب لمن أحبهم إنهم مني وأنا منهم. فاجعل صلواتك وبركاتك ورحمتك وغفرانك ورضوانك علي وعليهم وأدهنهم هرج وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله عز وجل يا ملائكتي وسكان السماوات إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرضا مطية ولا قمر منير ولا شمس مضيئة ولا فلك يدير ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري يدير ولا بحر يجري في محبة الخمسة الذين هم تحت الكساء. فقال الأمين جبرائيل يا ربي ومن تحت الكساء. فقال عز وجل هم أهل بيتي ونبوتي مع رسالتهم فاطمة أبوها وبعلها وبنوها. فقال جبرائيل يا ربي أتأذن لي أن أهبط الأرض لأكون معهم سادسا. فقال الله نعم قد أذنت لك. فهبط أمين جبرائيل وقال السلام عليك يا رسول الله اليولا يلقيك السلام ويخصك بالتحية لك ويقول لك وعزتي وجلالي إني ما خلقت سماء مبنية ولا أرض مطية ولا قمر منير ولا شمس مضيئة ولا فلك يدير ولا بحر يجري ولا فلك يسري إلا لأجلكم هابتكم قد أذن لي أدخل معكم فهل تأذنوا لي يا رسول الله. فقال رسول الله وعليك السلام يا أمين وحي الله إنه نعم قد أذنت لك. فدخل جبرائيل معنا تحت الكساء فقال لي أبي إن قد إليكم يقول إنما يريد الله ليذهب عنكم الرجس أهل البيت وطهرهم تطهيرا. فقال الله اليوم بي يا رسول الله أخبرني ما لي جلوسنا هذا تحت الكساء فضلي عند الله. فقال النبي والذي بعثني بالحق نبي وصفاني برسالته تجي ما ذكر حبلنا هذا في محفل من محافلي في جمع مشيتنا وما بينا إلا ونزلت عليهم رحمة وخفت بهم الأمر واستغفرت لهم إلى لا تفرقوا. فقال علي ذا والله فزنا وفاز شيئتنا رب الكعبة. فقال النبي ثانيا يا علي والذي بعثني بالحق نبي وصفاني برسالتي تجي ما ذكر هبلنا هذا في محفل من محافل أهل الأرض وفيه جمع مشيتنا ما بينا وفيه مهموم إلى فرج الله غمها فلما كشف الله غمها ولا تعلب حاجة إلا وكذا الله حاجته. فقال علي ذا والله وفزنا وسعدنا وكذلك شنا فازوا وسعدنا في الدنيا والآخرة ورب الكعبة. طيب
صلوات. कहती तिए खूब मैं याद से लिपट गए है अली अकबर कहती तिए खूबरी मैं याद से लिपट गए है अली अकबर अरमान पहना पोशाक शहानी अफसोस के राज आई ना तुझे ये जवानी कैसा था मुक़द्दर है अली अकबर कहती थी खूबरी मैं याद से लिपट गई है अली अकबर पहले तो एक आवाज पे उठ जाते थे बेटा अब इतनी सदाओं पे भी पहलू नहीं बदला क्या रोते हो दिल है अली अकबर कहती थी खूबरी मैं याद से लिपट गए है अली अकबर तारा बस पाल के परवान छाया वो गेसू वाला है मेरा मुँह में नहाया ये क्या हुआ दिल में है अली अकबर कहती थी खूबरी मैं याद से लिपट गए है अली अकबर माँ तेरी जुदाई में भला कैसे जिएगी मैं जाई सोरा जो खबर तेरी सुनेगी अब क्या करूं जी कर है अली अकबर कहती थी खूबरी मैं याद से पट गए है अली अकबर तुम्हें हिचकियां लेके जो नाम तोड़ रहे हो मुँह से हमेशा के लिए मोर रहे हो क्यों रोते हो दिल है अली अकबर मैं याद से लिपट गए है अली अकबर जब कोई जवां लाश नजर आती है महशर एक याद सोए कर वो भला जाती है महशर, दिल रोता है कह कर, है अली अकबर। कहती थी माँ हूँ बड़ी मैं, यद से लिपट कर, है अली अकबर। सलाम।
I would now like to invite Ali Rizvi to read a salam as well. Salawat bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. तौहीद की एक बरक़े जहिंदा है हुसैन। तौहीद की एक बरक़े जहिंदा है हुसैन। इल्हाद के बर्बाद कुनंदा है हुसैन। और आलिमो मजलूम के अंजाम में फर्क है, जालिम मजलूम के अंजाम में फर्क। मुर्दा है यजीद आज भी जिंदा है हुसैन। तौहीद की एक बरक़े मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु सकीना कैद हो कर शाम के जिंदा में जब आई। सकीना कैद हो कर शाम के जिंदा में जब आई। वो बच्ची उस अंधेरे घर की तारीकी में घबराई। मुक़द्दर ने अजब आफत की पहली रात दिखलाई। ज़मीं तो अर्श थी साया फिगन चरख मीनाई फूफी के साथ रहती थी नामा के पास सोती थी बरहना सर खड़ी जिंदा के दरवाजे पर रोती थी। हाँ उधर से जो गुजरता था उसे कहती थी सुनता जा मैं बेकस कैद में हूँ एक ये पैगाम है मेरा अगर बाबा मिले तुझको तो ये कहियो कसम खा खा सकीना पर मुसीबत है खबर लो शे वाला अगर तुझसे कहे खैमे में सोता छोड़ आया हूँ तो तू कहियो दरे जिंदा पारोता छोड़ आया हूँ सकीना मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु
I'd like to invite Zaki to recite his Majlis for today. Salawat bar Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. Ya Rasulullah. Ya Ali.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين بالقاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في قرآنه الكريم وهو أصدق القائلين قوله الحق. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا مودة في القربى. صدق الله العظيم. صلوات. صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. We very quickly reached the final day of the Majlis, well, of this little series we've got. And we focused over these past 3 days that we've had so far on the challenges that Imam Sajjad faced in his imamat and what he used to combat them. And what we focused on yesterday was knowledge, education. One of the greatest tools that our Imam used to get over the difficulties he faced. And for those of you who weren't here, I'll repeat again, the big difficulties that the Imam faced during his imamat was one, that in his time, culture had started to mix with religion a lot. People were struggling to tell the difference between what was culture and what was religion. So he needed to make that clear for people. And the second big problem that the Imam faced was that people cared a bit more about money and wealth and the things they had than they did about their religion. They stopped caring about Islam. The Imam had to fix that. Yesterday, we spoke about knowledge and how he used knowledge and education to teach the people and to help the people grow and to combat these two issues. Second thing, and that's what we're going to focus on today, that the Imam used was his own relationship with the people, how he was with the people, how the people were with him, his connection with them. The Imam used that in order to teach the people to go and in order to overcome the two big issues that his Imam had faced. But he didn't just build a really strong relationship with them. He did so using the Holy Quran, the book and the of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you'll find constantly where people speak to Imam Sajjad and when they come and they ask him questions, or even the Yazid, when they try to taunt him or they try to make him angry, fourth Imam, he replies by using the Quran. Again and again, he uses verses of the Quran. One of them is the one that I just recited. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا مَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. We've gone over that verse already, so I won't go over it again, but the verse, it means, oh Prophet, Allah is talking to our Holy Prophet. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling him, tell the people you don't want anything in return for what you've given them, what he's given them being Islam. He doesn't want anything in return except for love of the Ahlul Bayt, what you call muwadda. So the Imam, he uses this love of the Ahlul Bayt in order to keep people close to Islam, in order to teach people the true ways of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's religion. And so today I want to do the same thing. I want us to try and understand a little bit about the Ahlul Bayt were, but do so using the words of the Holy Quran. Understand them through the lens of the Holy Quran, because nobody understands the Ahlul Bayt better than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nobody understands them in a greater way, in a greater meaning, in a greater manner than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created them, who designed them, who made them so perfectly for each and every one of us to learn from. So I'll start off with where it all begins. I'll start off with our Holy Prophet, Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Reciting out loud, salawat ala Muhammad wa I just dropped this water on myself. So, the Holy Prophet in the Quran, we speak about him in different places and in different ways and in different meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, usually he refers to him with very loving names. Ya Muzammil, Ya Ayyuhal Mudaththir, Taha, Yasin. Words and names that we don't even know the meaning of. Just know they're the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes to talk to the Prophet. And then we see, and this might be one of the greatest before the Prophet in the Holy Quran. It's a surah that we recite every Friday. We recite it in the Friday prayers. Does anybody want to hazard a guess what surah that is? Surah Jummah, right? Surah Jummah we recite every Friday in our Friday prayers, and it begins by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Yusabbihu lillahi ma fis samawati wa ma fil ardi al-malik al-quddus al-aziz al-hakim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says everything that exists, everything in the heaven, the earth, it praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then it refers to him as his titles. Al-Malik al-Quddus al-Aziz al-Hakim. The ruler, the leader, the king. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the second verse, he goes on. He's already told us everything that is in existence, in the heavens and the earth, it praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he goes on. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. I've gone on and that was a lot of Arabic, so I'll break it down for you guys. We only really need the beginning of that verse. So I'll focus on that bit. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم. He's already told us that everything that is in the heavens and the earth, it remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it does tasbih, it praises of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he introduces himself to us. Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim. Basically, they're all different ways of saying he's the king, he's the ruler, he's the leader, right? But he continues on introducing himself. هُوَ الَّذِي بَعْثَ فِي الْإِيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. He is the one who sent down a prophet from amongst the people to teach them, to guide them, to purify them. This verse talking about? Does anybody want to have a look at it? Who's this verse talking about? Is it the prophet? That's the question. So when we look at the verse, immediately we think he's talking about the prophet, but he's not. Because look at how the verse starts. وَالَّذِي, he is the one, بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ, who sent the people a prophet from amongst them. So we're not actually talking about the prophet. We're talking about? We're talking about Allah, because he's the one who did it. At first glance, it feels like talking about the prophet, right? And that's what we all think when we first read it. But then when you go back over it, Allah is talking about himself. And the reason I say that this is one of the greatest blessings that the Prophet is given in the Quran is because what's Allah doing here? Why did he use the Prophet's name? He used the Prophet's name here, or he mentioned the Prophet here to introduce himself to the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he wanted the people to recognize who he is, he decided the best way to do that is to show them through the Prophet. Show them the Prophet and they'll realize who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. He's already told us he is Al-Malik, Al-Quddus, Al-Aziz, Al-Hakim. He's the ruler, he's king, he's the leader. But then he goes on and he says, look, you want to recognize who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is? Huwa alladhi, he is the one who ba'tha fil ummiyina, amongst all of the people he sent what? Rasulan minhum, a prophet from amongst them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if you want to recognize Allah, if you want to know Allah, if you want to understand Allah in whichever capacity you can understand him in, to whatever level you can understand him in, then you have to recognize the Prophet. You have to go and try and understand the Prophet. You have to go through the Prophet. It's the only way to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when I say understand Allah, I mean in our own capacity, however much we can understand him. And the example that's often given is that if I go to the ocean with a cup of water, I can't come back with the entire ocean, but I can come back with a cup's worth of the ocean, right? I can come back with a cup's worth of water. If I go there with a jug, I can come back with a jug's worth of water. If I go there with a massive water bottle, I can come back with that much water. However much water's in the ocean, that's there, right? However much I take is up to me. What's my capacity? What's my ability to take from it? And we all have a different capacity to understand Allah. We all have different levels of ability on how we can understand Allah. And it doesn't make one of us better than the other. There's times where people come to our imams and they often ask the imam pretty much the same question. A lot of people come and they ask the same question. A lot of people come to the imam and they say to him, look, prove to me that this God you talk about exists. You're always saying there's this God and he's only one, there's only one God, and you know, he's like this and he's like this and he's like this. He's Al-Rahman, he's Al-Rahim, he's Al-Malik, he's Al-Quddus, he's Al-Hayy, he's Al-Qayyum, he's Al-Qadir, he's Al-Sami, he's Al-Basir. We've got all you say all stuff about this God. Prove to me he exists. And that's a fair question. We should be able to say, you know what, this is why I believe Allah exists. So people come to the imam all the time and they ask the imam, whichever imam it was, they ask the imams of their time, prove to me your God exists. And it strikes me that it shows us the different levels of capacity that we have. Because there's a time where a man comes to one of our imams and says to him, Ya Imam, prove to me that your God exists. So the imam, he says to him, have you ever seen an egg? The man goes, yeah, I've seen an egg. The imam goes, are you familiar with an egg? The man goes, yeah, I'm familiar with an egg. So the imam goes, okay, I'm going to describe an egg to you. You tell me if I'm correct in my description. Tell me if the way I'm describing the egg is right or wrong. So the imam goes, first you have a hard shell. You have a hard shell around it. The man's like, yeah, there's a hard shell. And then the imam says, then there's a layer of silver. And the reason that I'm using the imam's words exactly here, and I'm not translating them for you guys, is because sometimes we have to recognize that the words of the Quran, the words of the Hadith, the words of our prophets and imams, they might not match exactly how we talk today, but that doesn't mean they're not talking about the same things that we see in our life. So the imam asks him, does it have a layer of silver inside that shell? And now all of us would look at that and go, there's no layer of silver inside the shell. There's no, what silver is there in these eggs? Where are they finding these eggs? But what the imam's talking about is the egg whites, right? The white of the egg. The man goes, yeah, there's a layer of silver. And the imam goes, inside the layer of silver, is there a layer of gold? And what's the layer of gold? The yolk, right? Now, when we hear it, we're looking at that and thinking, layer of gold? What do you mean? What's the layer of gold? But we see what the Imam's talking about, right? He's talking about the yolk, the gold inside. So the Imam says to the guy, so am I right? There's a hard shell, layer of silver, layer of gold. And the man goes, yeah, that's exactly how it is. That's what an egg is like. You got it. The Imam goes, so what does that hard shell on the outside do? The man says it protects the egg, protects the layers inside it, doesn't let anything else get in. And the Imam goes, absolutely, you've got it. It doesn't let anything else in. So then the Imam stops and he looks at the guy and he goes, so what happens with an egg? The man says, well, after a while it hatches and like a baby chick comes out. And the Imam stops him there and he goes, all right, so tell me, if from that shell nothing ever gets inside the egg, then how does a baby chick come out? There must be something else that's empowering that egg. There must be something else that's having an effect or an impact on that egg. And the man stopped and he was completely astounded. He's like, yeah, you're right. Nothing ever goes in the egg because of that shell. That egg, it is as it is. Nothing ever enters it but a chick, a fully formed chick, it comes out. And that made the man believe in the message of the Imam. That made the man believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in another occasion, a man comes to the Imam and he says to him, oh Imam, prove to me your God exists. And the Imam looks at him and goes, what's your name? And the man, without even replying, without saying his name, he just stops, he starts thinking and he goes, I believe your God exists. I get it. And the Imam's companion, so the Imam, he tells him how to say the kalma and how to understand the basic Islam, and then he sends him on his way. The Imam's companions are sat around him and they look at the Imam and they go, yeah, Imam, what just happened? The Imam goes, the guy came to me with a question. I answered his question. He no, Imam, we got that bit. We saw he came, he asked you, does God exist? But you didn't answer his question. You asked him what his name is. And the Imam looks at them, he's like, yeah, that's all the answer he needed. So he goes, Imam, please, can you explain it to us a little bit? We're very confused here. We don't know what's going on. The Imam looks at them, he goes, the guy's name was Abdullah. Does anybody know what Abdullah means? Slave of God, servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when he gets told your name is, he gets asked, what's your name? And the guy's name, servant of Allah. And in his head, he thought, you know what? All these years, my name's been servant of Allah. My name's been servant of God. There must be some reason for existing. There must be some purpose to me existing. That's got to be God. And he's like, yeah, I believe it. I accept it. Cool. There's a God. That's it. That's all the proof I need. Now, to us, it's a very stupid way to accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It might seem like, what do you mean? Just because your name's Abdullah, that means there has to be a God. We might sit there and think, that doesn't make sense. But to him, that's all he did. In his capacity to understand Allah, his level of understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was just that much. The other guy, he comes to the Imam and he needs this whole explanation in this diagram of an egg to understand it and the inner biology of the marine world. And he needs to understand that to understand God. And there's another time where a man, he comes to the Imam, and this one's really quite cool, right? It's also egg-based. It's just a coincidence. I'm not going on a theme here. But a man comes to one of the Imams and he says, Ya Imam, if your God is so powerful, can he fit the entire world into an egg without making the egg bigger or the world smaller? And the Imam looks at him and he goes, yeah, of course. I'd look at him and be like, Imam, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if that can be done. Even, is that possible? And the Imam goes, yeah, that can be done. And the man goes, how is that possible? How can Allah fit the whole world into an egg without making the egg any bigger or the world any smaller? And the Imam looks at the guy and he goes, can you see the world? He goes, yeah. He's like, how much of it can you see? He's like, well, as much as is in front of me, I can see it all. The Imam goes, all right, so what's bigger, the world or your eye? And the man goes, well, the world's bigger. The Imam looks at me and goes, if Allah can fit the whole world inside your eye, why can't he do it inside of your eye? Is smaller than an egg, right? And that man, he's astounded. He goes, yeah. Only in that moment does he realize, all right, you know what? Maybe Allah does exist. Allah, he must exist. This kind of power, this kind of level, that doesn't come from nowhere. He also realizes in that moment, this man I'm speaking to, the Imam, he's no ordinary man. This is no ordinary guy, because who else in the whole world would ever have come up with that explanation? Who else could ever think like that and on that level other than? And so we all have different levels and different capacities of understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to recognize us, to understand him, the point that he sends us to is what? Is our holy Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And we see that here in Surah Jumu'ah. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم Everything in the world, in the heavens and earth, praises Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the king, he is the ruler, he is the leader, and he is the one who sent the people a prophet from amongst them. If we want to recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to understand and recognize the prophet in our own capacity, but that's the root. And this is one of the greatest blessings given. Why? Because what are we all searching for in life? In life, our need, everything, our intention for everything, it should be qurbatan ila Allah, to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's telling you, everything you want in life, it should be for that purpose. Which means that everything you want in life, the way to get it is the Prophet. Everything you need in life, you need the Prophet for it. Everything you want in life, you need the Prophet for that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us how important the Holy Prophet is here. I'm zooming on because time's flying by. The second personality that we remember is our first Imam, Ali Murza alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Our Imam, he's described very beautifully in the Quran. He's described again and again and again, and spoke about the event of Ghadir Qum where the Imam was kind of appointed as the ruler, the leader, the master of all the people. We spoke about that, I think it was 2 days ago now. But there's so many different points where our Imam is mentioned in the Quran. I want to mention just one of them today, right? Surah Shams. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he speaks in Surah Shams in the very first 2 verses about what? وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا طَلَاهَا. By the sun and its spectacular brightness, right? The sun and the way it shines, and the moon which follows it. Now here's the issue. If I take the Quran very literally, word for word, then Allah would have made a mistake here. Because, and can anybody figure out what the mistake is in there? By the sun and its brightness and the moon that follows it. So Jad, looked like you got it first. The moon doesn't follow the sun, you're right. The moon doesn't follow the sun, it follows the earth. So when the scholars looked at this, they thought, did Allah make a mistake? Is the Quran wrong in Surah Shams? And they looked through it and they kind of tried to understand the verse and they put it together with other verses and everything. And they came to the conclusion that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's not actually talking about the sun and the moon in the sky that we see. When he speaks about a shams, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about the Holy Prophet. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, by the sun and its brilliant shine, the way it shines, right? And we speak about the Prophet as being nur. The Prophet is a light, a guidance, a shining light. And if the Prophet is the shams that we're talking about, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, what is the moon that constantly follows the Prophet? If you want to find what it is always following the Prophet, always behind the Prophet, always with the Prophet, in every history book, in every narration, everywhere you look, the only place you will find anything that matches that description is our first Imam Ali alayhi salatu wassalam. You'll find that Amirul Mu'mineen is the only thing that follows the sun, which is the Prophet, in that manner. Yeah. You see, here in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling us the link between our Prophet and our Imam. They are very close and they can't be separated. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that surah, He goes on, and when He's talking about the sun and its shine and the moon which follows it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes on and He says what He means to say by this. He's talking about how people purify themselves. He's talking about how they make themselves better Muslims, how they purify themselves and keep themselves pure. And when we talk about purity, then the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam are the absolute beacon of purity. Not because we said so, not because they said so, but in fact Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran Himself, He says it. إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ أَهْلَ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرُكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. Recite aloud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that verse tells us very famously that the Ahlul Bayt are those people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself keeps dirt and impurity far away from. He keeps dirt and impurity away from the Ahlul Bayt. So when we talk about purity, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's told us the very beacon and the very center of purity itself is the Ahlul Bayt. Here in the Holy Quran, He says, that he keeps dirt and impurity away from the Ahlul Bayt. And if you want to figure out the level of how far Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps dirt and impurity from Ahlul Bayt, you have to flip the script a little bit to understand it. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us constantly about the Day of Judgment. And He always tells us the same thing, that it's very near, it's coming, it's very soon, it's very close, it's very near, right? And distance, time, these are quite relative things to us. For one of you guys, you might think, for instance, Ali might think that today has been a super, super long day, but for me, a really quick day. For, I don't know, for Sajjad, he might think that driving to Tooting is a really long way away and it's a really long journey, but for me, it's a very small journey, it's a minor journey, right? For each and every one of us, time, distances, they're all what you call relative. We see differences in different ways. In fact, I'll give you guys an example. For me, driving to Slough, which is outside of London, that doesn't feel long. I don't know why, it just doesn't. I'm used to it. It doesn't feel long to me. But if I have to drive from my house to East London, which takes me exactly the same amount of time, by the way. It takes me exactly the same amount of time to go from my house to Slough as it does from my house to East London. But I find East London so much longer. If I have to drive to East London, I feel like I have to drive to the other side of the world. Slough, that's nothing, because, you know, just outside London, it's not a problem. East London is inside London, but I feel like it takes longer. It doesn't. The amount of time is the same. I just feel like it's longer. Time, distance, they're relative. They depend on the person who's experiencing them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's constantly telling us, constantly telling us, the Day of Judgment is near, the Day of Judgment is close, the Day of Judgment is about to arrive. The message of Islam in the Holy Quran, that was sealed about 1400 years ago. The Day of Judgment still hasn't shown up. It still hasn't arrived, but Allah is telling us it's close, it's nearby. So by Allah's standards, even if we say tomorrow's the Day of Judgment, right? If we say it's all going to start tomorrow, that means 1400 years is Allah's understanding of close. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees closeness. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He kept an impurity far away from the Ahlul Bayt, just imagine how far is for Allah. Just imagine how far away we're talking. When close is 1400 years away, imagine what far is. See, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He talks about the Ahlul Bayt here in the Holy Quran, He tells us that He keeps impurity, rijs, He keeps it very far away from them. And then we come into the very specifics. So we've spoken about the Prophet and we've spoken about Imam Ali, we've spoken about the Ahlul Bayt as a whole. Now Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, salamullahi alayha. She's mentioned in the Holy Quran as well. And often when we talk about where she's mentioned in the Holy Quran, we talk about Surah Kawthar, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addresses the Prophet and tells him, "O Holy Prophet of Allah, you are not abtar, your enemies are abtar." Now, abtar it was almost like an insult in the days of Arab, but you know, there's some insults that you'll use with your mates, and then there's some insults which like really, really posh people will use. They'll say something which you don't even realize you've been insulted, right? This is like one of those really posh ones. It's an insult, but you can't even consider it rude. It's just nice. Abtar is one of those. And what it means is an animal with no tail. An animal with no tail in those days, it's used to describe somebody who doesn't have any children. And the reason that people used to call the Holy Prophet Abtar, or they used to insult him by saying it, is because the Prophet had a few sons, they were born, and then they would die in their infancy. They would die as children. So they used to say to him, like, "No kids, you are Abtar," to insult him, to hurt him. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He sends Surah Kawthar, in which He says, "Inna a'taynaka al-Kawthar." Verily, we have given you a great amount of goodness. We have given you, and Kawthar, it literally means a lot of goodness. That's what it means. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, verily, we have given you a lot of goodness. What is that goodness that He has given? We see it in the final verse of Surah Kawthar. There's only 3 of them. In the final verse, we see it where He says, "Inna shaka huwa al-abtar." Indeed, your enemies, they are abtar. They are the ones with no children, with no lineage. But how so? Today in the world, if you meet somebody who is a Sayyid, what does that mean? Does anybody know what it means to be Sayyid, Sajjad? They're a descendant of Rasulullah. They've come from the lineage of Rasulullah. That means Rasulullah is their granddads, going back and back and back, right? Now, somebody who doesn't have any children, how can it be possible that today I can see at least 3, 4 of you who I know for a fact are Sayyid in this room? I am as well, alhamdulillah. There might be more of you, and I just can't remember your surnames right now. But today, over the world, you'll find the descendants of the Holy Prophet, but you won't know who the descendants of his enemies are. We just don't know. They've disappeared into the world. Whether they still exist or not, we don't know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's telling the Holy Prophet, you will have a lineage, you will have a line of people who come from you, who come after you. You will have nations of people who exist because of you. And where did that lineage go from with the Holy Prophet? Where did that come from? When it comes to the Holy Prophet, his lineage, it doesn't run through his sons like it does for everybody else. For every other person you meet, their son carries their name forward. If I am a Rizvi, if I have a son, he'll be a Rizvi. If I have a daughter, she will be a Rizvi. My son's kids, they will also be Rizvi. My daughter's kids, they will have whatever surname my daughter's husband has. Whatever surname their dad has, that's their surname. They're now from his family. Now, that's the case for everybody in the world. That's how it works. But to this day, we are remembered as the descendants, not of Imam Ali, but the descendants of the Holy Prophet through his daughter, Bibi Fatima al-Zahra. We're remembered as the descendants of the daughter of the Prophet, not of any of his sons who never survived, but from his daughter. So Surah Kawthar is speaking about Bibi Fatima, but there's another verse of the Holy Quran which speaks about her as well. And I want to quickly rush through this because we're running out of time. Unfortunately, it's the last day as well, so I can't be like, oh, we'll finish it off tomorrow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in another verse of another surah of the Holy Quran, he speaks about Bibi Fatima. And this is a title of Bibi Fatima that a lot of people don't know. They don't recognize, they don't realize that this is actually a title of Bibi Fatima as well. One of the titles of Bibi Fatima is Laylatul Qadr, the night of destiny. That's one of the titles of that lady. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's revealed the whole surah of Surah Al-Qadr. He's revealed a whole surah. And one of the beautiful things that He puts in that surah is where He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. And what can you possibly know? What can you ever know of what Laylatul Qadr is? You will never truly understand what Laylatul Qadr is. He can tell us, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can tell us, He can give us the information, but we'll never properly understand what Laylatul Qadr is. And the way that works, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives a lot of information, but we don't understand all of it. It's like, for instance, if I meet a blind man who has never seen anything in his whole life, he's never seen anything at all. And I'm told what I have to do is I have to explain to him what the color red is. How can I possibly do that? I can tell him all about the physics of how a color is a color. I can tell him all about the tones and the shades, and I can explain it all to him. Until that man sees the color red, he's not going to know what it is. There is no way you can explain a color to somebody who's never seen color. It's just not possible. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us all this information in the Quran, but we can't understand all of it. He tells us a little bit about Laylatul Qadr. He tells us it's greater than 1,000 nights. He tells us the angels come down from heaven. He tells us Jibreel especially comes down from heaven. He tells us all of this. But He also says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا لَيْلَةُ الْقَدْرِ. What do you know of what Laylatul Qadr is? You can't know. You won't ever. One of the titles of Bibi Fatima is Laylatul Qadr, telling us we won't ever understand the level of Bibi Fatima. We won't ever understand who she is, what she is. We can't. And another title of Bibi Fatima, which I love, and it links into this quite well, is Sirrum Israr Allah. Bibi Fatima is a secret from amongst the secrets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the secrets that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps in the world, the best secret He has kept is Bibi Fatima herself. She is Sirrum min Asrar Allah, secret from amongst the secrets of Allah. It's one of the most beautiful titles of hers, for me at least. And it's the same thing with Laylatul Qadr. It is a secret. The level of Laylatul Qadr, what it is entirely, it's a secret. And then finally, we talk about Imam Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam. Imam Hassan and Hussein alayhi salam, again, they are also mentioned in the Holy Quran in a few different places. I want to speak very specifically about an event that many of you heard of, and some of you may be a little bit more familiar with it, which is the event of Mubahala. In the event of Mubahala, Imams Hassan and Hussein are brought forward. And how are they brought forward? The Holy Prophet is told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring abna'una or abna'ana. Bring your sons or our sons. Now the Holy Prophet decides, because he hasn't got any sons of his own who have survived, the Holy Prophet tells the whole world who Imam Hassan and Hussein are by bringing them in the place of Abna'ana, of his sons. The two Imams here in the Quran are referred to as the sons of the Prophet, the ones who he is so close with, the ones who he has such a great relationship with, who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with. And finally, I'll focus very specifically on Imam Hussein alayhi salam, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I want you guys to take a very important lesson from this as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one of the verses of the Holy Quran, which was also heard in the skies at the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam's final battle in Karbala. On the day of Ashura, in his final battle, there is a cry heard from the heavens, and it is a verse of the Holy Quran that they hear. And that says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyatuhal nafsul mutma'inna, irja'i ila rabbika, radiyatan mardiya. O the content soul, return to your Lord, for he is happy with you and pleased with you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he continues, Fadkhuli fi ibadi, wadkhuli jannati. And continue in with those who worship me and enter my paradise. And the thing I want you guys to take away from this is what the point of Islam is. What makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy? When he says, Ya ayyuhan nafsul mutma'in, O the content soul, return to your Lord, for he is happy with you and he is pleased with you. Contentment, what is that? To be content means to be happy. To be content means to be at peace, to enjoy your life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, if you are happy in life, if you find happiness and peace, the truest form of happiness, then Allah is happy with you. Islam isn't meant to be here to make life difficult. Islam is here to make life a pain. Islam isn't here to stop you from having fun or enjoy yourself or whatever. No. Islam is here for you to be happy. And when you are happy, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says it here in the Holy Quran, radiyatan mardiya. He is happy with you and he is pleased with you. Why? Because you found happiness in this world. When we speak about a nafsul mutma'inna, any of us can have nafsul mutma'inna, the content soul. It just means we are at peace. But when we speak about it specifically, it was addressed to Imam Hussein. It was addressed to our third Imam there in Karbala. The verse had been revealed long before that in the time of the Prophet, but in Karbala, it was called out and addressed to Imam Hussein as nafsul mutma'inna. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is happy with, who is pleased with. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he wants us to be happy. He wants us to be happy. He wants us to be content. He wants us to be at peace. The way to reach that peace is by reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you want to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these five personalities we've discussed today, our Holy Prophet, his daughter Bibi Fatima, Imam Ali alayhi salam, her husband, and her two sons, Imam Hassan and Hussein, the Panjatan as they're known, the Ahlul Bayt as we understand them. They are the way to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are the way to reach him. They are the way to find happiness in this life, in the next life. To find peace and contentment, you go through them. And when you do that, you can truly look at the life of Imam Zainul Abidin, our fourth Imam, the one who we did not mention in all of this. In his life, he used knowledge and education to teach the people. He also used the connection with the Ahlul Bayt and spoke using words of the Quran so that the people would understand who he was and be able to reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You stay close to intelligence, you stay close to the Ahlul Bayt, and you stay close to the Quran. Those are the three secrets of success for this life and the next life. Those are the three keys you need to be able to live a truly successful life and to truly go through both this life and the next in happiness, in contentment, and in peace. Recite aloud, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We're approaching the days of Arba'in, which is the 40th day after the Shahadat of Imam Hussein. It's the 40th day which we remember and we commemorate often. I won't get a chance in front of you guys to recite the Masa'ib of Arba'in during the time of Arba'in because inshallah I'll be in Iraq. But today I want to share the Masa'ib of Arba'in, the pains of Arba'in. And the reason that we remember Arba'in is because it comes around the time that the family of Imam Hussein was released from that prison in Sham. Yesterday we got to the point of where Bibi Sakina had been buried. Not long after, there's a time where a man, he comes to the city of Sham and he has no money. He's run out of money. So he thinks to himself, how do I get money? How do I get by? He thinks to himself, if I take a gift, a present to the king of Sham, then maybe he'll give me some money as a reward in return. The king at the time is Yazid. He decides, I'm going to take a gift to Yazid, and when I take this gift to Yazid, maybe he'll reward me by giving me money. So he finds a deer and he captures this deer. And he thinks to himself, I'll take this deer to Yazid and I'll say I to you as a gift. Captures this deer and he's dragging it through the streets of Sham. And as he goes past the prison of Sham, where the family of Imam Hussein is being held captive. As he goes past prison, the deer, it pulls and it tugs and it wriggles free and it rushes over prison. From the prison, there's a small area where it is caged. You can see into the prison. You can see the prisoners. You can see them sat there. Imam Zain al-Abidin, he often used to sit in this part of the cell where people see him from the outside and he could see the outside world. This deer, it runs over to where the Imam is and it starts baying and calling out and screaming in its own language. But it's addressing Imam Zain al-Abidin, just as though it's talking to the Imam. This man, the hunter, he comes rushing over to capture his deer again. He sees the Imam in the prison. The Imam looks at him, he says, if you would, I have something to ask of you. The man looks at him, he says, what do you want? The Imam says, let the deer go for a little while. I promise you it will come back. Just let it go for a little while. The man looks at the Imam and he goes, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? The Imam says, look, I understand the language of the animals. I speak the language of the animals. I can understand when they talk. This deer has come over to me and it's told me it won't run away from you. The deer's come over to me and it's told me it won't try and escape. All it wants is just a little bit of time. Why? Because when you captured it, it had gone to get food for its family. But this deer has children wherever they nestle, wherever they see, wherever their home is. This deer has children there. It's asking for just a little time so it can go back and feed its children. The Imam, he convinces this man, he convinces the hunter. The hunter's intrigued. He wants to see, is this man really telling the truth? Can it really be true that he speaks the language of the deers? So he decides to test Imam Sajjad. He says, fine, I'll let it go if you promise that it will come back. And the Imam says, I promise. And the man says, if the deer does not come back, I'll take my revenge once as you can. So he lets go of the deer runs away, and sure enough, a little while later it comes back. The man, confused and perplexed, a Christian man, I should mention. He looks at the Imam, he goes, how did you know that the deer was going to come back? The Imam said, I speak the language of the deers. It gave me its word that it would return. The man looks at me, he goes, who are you? What are you doing in this prison? Why are you here? He says, you're no ordinary man. He tells him, my name is Ali. I'm the son of Imam Hussein. Hussein is the grandson of the Prophet of the Muslims. And now this man's shocked. How can this be that a man so special, a man so incredible, is in here in a prison cell, and not any ordinary prison cell? Ceiling so low to the point where Imam Zain al-Abidin cannot stand straight in the prison of Sham. He has to stand with his back hunched over. Barely any food or water to drink. A young who, according to most reports, was between 25 to 30 years old. Yet when you see his face, he looks like an old man, withered, in pain, having gone through so much difficulty. The man, the hunter, he can't bear it, he can't take it. He goes and he starts speaking out in the streets of Sham. He starts calling out to all the people, oh people, don't you know you have the great grandson of your own prophet in the prison? He's not like any other ordinary man. He starts riling up the people. The people start listening to him more and more, to the point where Yazid, he realizes, if I keep Sayyid al-Sajjad in the prison for much longer, then the people turn against me. The people are no longer on my side. So Yazid, he decides, you know what? The prisoners have been for a year. It's time to let them go. It's time to release them. They send news to Sayyid al-Sajjad that he will be released. But Sayyid al-Sajjad, before he responds, he goes to his auntie Zainab and he says to her, Auntie Zainab, they have offered us a release from... Bibi Zainab responds, she says, we won't leave this prison unless our demands are accepted. We have certain demands. When they're accepted, our conditions, then we will leave. What were those conditions of Bibi Zainab? First condition was that since Karbala, every time the women would cry, the guards would come and they would lash them and they would whip them and they would beat them. Sayyidah Zainab said the first thing is we need a place where we can sit and we can cry and remember remember our families. This gift was granted. This wish was granted. The second condition was what? Bibi Zainab, she says the second condition is the things that were stolen from the women and children in Sham Ghariba, they be returned. She was told they can't gather everything because soldiers have taken things home, but the things that were kept in the palace, they can be returned. They accept this condition too. And then they gather, they get ready, leave the prison, they go into that house where they had set the place up for the first Majlis, the first place where the women and children would cry over the Ahlul Bayt. Now as they enter, they begin the first ever Majlis Azhar. That begins remembering the martyrs. She begins calling out, Wa Husayna. She begins calling out, Wa Abbasa. The women and the children, they sit there and they cry and they cry and they cry until one point where they hear a knock at the door. When they open the door, there is a line of maids standing there. Maids from the palace who have been sent. And in each one of those maids' hands is a tray. The first maid enters, in her hand is the tray. In the tray, they see a beautiful shining head of one of the martyrs. You see, until now, the heads of each of the martyrs had been kept in the palace of Yazid. The women who are already crying, they see this head. They begin weeping even more and more and more. Why? Because they have seen finally in front of them the head of Abul Fadl Abbas. They cry out, Abbas, where were you when they came and attacked us? Where were you when they burned our tents? Abbas, where were you when they killed our pen? Abbas, where were you when they attacked Hussein? Abbas, when they had chains in our hands, when they used to lash us and beat, where were you then? They take the head of Abul Fadl Abbas into the room. Bibi Kulthum, his sister, steps forward. She takes the head of Abul Fadl Abbas and they sit there and they cry over Abul Fadl Abbas. A short while later, there is a knock at the door. Another maid stands there with her head in her hands. She walks in with this tray. Now the women erupt into tears again. Why? It is as though a moon has entered the ground. A moon has come down from the sky and entered that room in Sham. The women all look around. They turn to Bibi Layla. She rushes forward and takes the head of her Akbar. A short while later, another knock at the door. Now the time when the head is brought in, one mother rushes forward. She takes the head in her hands. She looks at it and she says, Qasim, what has happened? When I sent you out from the tent, my Qasim, your bones were not crushed. My Qasim, your skull had not been broken. What's happened, oh Qasim? She takes the head of Qasim in her hands. A little while, another knock at the door. They open the door. A head is brought in, but it was unlike the other heads. Why? Everybody else was at least a boy or an adult. This time, the 6-month-old Asra, his head brought in. Bibi Rabab collapses on the floor. The head of Asra is placed next to her. She cries and she weeps and she screams in pain as she sees her baby boy. Another time, there is a knock at the door. This time, the women will not control themselves. This time, the women cannot hold it in. If there was anybody in the room who had not cried yet, when they see the head of Hussein, they all erupt into tears. But when I read that they brought the head of Imam Hussein in that moment, something struck me. I thought about one thing to mind. Yesterday in the Masaib, we spoke about how the head of Imam Hussein was brought into the prison of Sham, how Bibi Sakina died with her father's head in her hands, how she was clutching the head of Hussein in her final moments. Now, when the maids brought the head of Imam Hussein into that house where they held the Majlis Azhar, my mind went back to the prison and I thought to myself, if the maids have only just brought the head of Imam Hussein in, that means between the time that Sakina died and the time they were released from the prison, at one point the guards returned to that and they took the head of Hussein back, but I don't know if they took the head of Hussein from the clutches of Sakina or if they pulled it away from Sajjad or if Sayyida Zainab had been sat there with her brother's hands. When did they come? Who did they take it from? I cannot tell you. All I know is in the prison of Sham, they brought the head of Mawla Hussein, the women all in tears, weeping and wailing, the sounds echoing throughout the city of Sham. Then, once all the heads had been brought in, they started bringing in the belongings of the Ahlul Bayt which had been stolen. There were many things amongst them. There is one moment where there is a knock at the door. A maid walks in with a tray in her hands. Now, all the women who had been crying, they immediately stop their tears. They immediately fall into a silent hush. The grief turns into worry and concern. The women now, they are no longer upset, but now they are scared. Why? Why do the women become scared in this moment? What has been brought in this tray? They become scared. Look towards Bibi Rabab. Rabab has regained consciousness since she saw the head of Ali in al-Asghar. As they look to the tray, they see two small earrings. They look to Bibi Rabab who cries, what can I do with these two blood-soaked earrings? Here I have the head of my Asghar, but my Asghar has been killed. Here I have the earrings of Sakina, but she lies under the prison of Sham. Bibi Rabab, the women are worried. How will she take the pain? How will she accept having lost her Asghar and her Sakina? Seeing those two earrings of her darling daughter, the women and children, they finish their majlis. They stay there crying for 3 days. They remember the Ahlul Bayt for 3 days. At one point, Sayyid Sajjad, he turns to the women and children and he says to them, enough. It has come for us to leave this city. The time has come for us to leave Sham. It is time to return towards Medina. The women begin to get ready. The carriages are prepared. They are lined up outside. One by one, the women leave the house. They enter the carriages. When there is nobody left in the house, Sayyid Sajjad comes to his auntie Zainab. He says to her, Auntie Zainab, are all the women in the carriages? Is he ready to leave? Bibi Zainab looks at him. She says, Sajjad, everybody is ready to go. Everybody is in the carriage with the exception of one lady. Sajjad, I don't know where your mother Bab has gone. I don't know where she is. I cannot find her. Say Sajjad, he looks at his auntie Zainab. As tears fill his eyes, he says, my auntie Zainab, leave it with me. Sajjad knows his mother has gone. As he says this, he leaves the house. He begins walking through the streets of Sham until he reaches that prison where for 1 year they were held captive. As he walks in hell, there is a small grave in that cell. Over the grave, Bibi Rabab lies, calling out, my Sakina, how can your mother leave you? I would call out to Mawla Ali. There was a time when Sayyida Zahra left this world. The angels came down to Imam Ali. They said to him, Ya Ali, Hassan and Hussein, who are hugging the body of their mother and crying. Where they cry, the heavens shake, while Hassan and Hussein are in tears. There is chaos in the skies. Ya Ali, pull Hassan and Hussein away from the body of Zahra. I would ask, Ya Ali, tell us how did you pull Hassan and Hussein away from Zahra? Sajjad needs to know, how can he pull Rabab away from the body of Sakina, away from the grave? Somehow my Mawla does. He pulls Bibi Rabab away. I'm skipping through the Masa'ib. I've got my eye on the time. One final line of Masa'ib I wish to remember. One final bit of the tragedy that I wish to I've skipped past all of what happened after, all of when they went to Karbala. I'll simply remember when they reached back to Medina, as the women and children arrive in Medina. Bibi Zainab first, she goes to Masjid al-Nabawi. She goes to her grandfather. She sits there and she cries and she tells him everything that happened. She calls out, Ya Rasulullah, they killed your Hussein. Ya Rasulullah, they set fire to the tents. Ya Rasulullah, they put us in chains and shackles. Ya Rasulullah, they paraded us through the streets. Oh Prophet of Allah, oh grandfather, they left us in prison for 1 whole year without enough food, without enough water. My grandfather Rasulullah, they did all this. She remembers all that they did. She then goes to Jannat al-Baqi. She sits by the grave of her big brother Hassan Mujtaba. She says, Hassan, you weren't there, but they trampled the body of your Qasim. Hassan, Zainab was watching as they stabbed Akbar with a spear. Hassan, you didn't have to see as they killed my Hussein. She tells Imam Hassan everything that has happened. From there, she goes to the house of Imam Hussein. She's 3 days in Imam Hussein's house until her husband, Hazrat Abdullah, the son of Ja'far Tayyar, he sends someone to go and get her. Someone to her, Ya Zainab, oh Lady Zainab, your husband is at home. He is waiting to see you. He wishes for you to return home. Had Sayyidah Zainab not returned home yet? Why had she waited so long before she went back to her own home? We find out in this moment. As Zainab is at her home, she steps through the doors of her house. As she enters her house, there is a small room on the left-hand side. As she looks in the room, she sees on the floor 2 small musallas laid out. This is where her Honor Muhammad used to pray the namaz. Sayyidah, she had not cried over her 2 sons from Karbala till Medina. From Ashura till now, she had not cried over Honor Muhammad. She enters that room. Zainab falls to the ground. She turns to face Najaf, picks up the musallas and holds them to her chest. She turns to her mother. She calls out, Hussein, my brother, I didn't cry over them when I died in Karbala. I didn't cry over them in Kufa or in Sham. When we went to the prison of Sham, I didn't cry for Honor Muhammad. When we had a majlis in the house when we were released, I didn't cry over Muhammad. When we returned to Karbala, I didn't cry. When we came to Medina, at the grave of Rasulullah, I told him about everything, but I didn't honor Muhammad. When I went to the grave of my brother Hassan, I cried about everything. I didn't cry about honor Muhammad. But Hussein, Zainab is a mother after all. Give me permission on this day. Let Zainab finally remember her 2 princes. Let me cry over my honor Muhammad. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We raise our hands in dua. Allah, over these holy months of Muharram and Safar, accept all our ibadat. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen around the world struggling with ill health, grant them complete shifa. Oh Allah, for all those mu'mineen who have left this world, and in particular the marhumeen of those present, raise their ranks. Oh Allah, hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time and allow us to enter Jannah under his banner. ربنا تقبلنا إنك أنت السميع الدعاء ماطن حسين.
आले इमरान ने कहा और जिंदा ने कहा ये बहन कैद हुई तू ना आया गाजी जब हृदा से चनी मैं सदा देती रही आया गाजी कैद खाने में कज़ा जब सकिया को मिली देखे करते का कफन बच्ची दफनाई गई असगरी नाम तेरा सूरत नाद अली बस मैं दोहराती रही तू ना आया गाजी जब हृदा से चली सदा रही तू ना आया गाजी हमको पानी ना मिले तेरी खुशबू तो रहे तेरे बाजू से चाहे बचकी सच दे मगर हो ना सका तेरे बाजू में जुदा मुझ पे है तशना लगी तू ना आया गाजी हृदा से चनी मैं सदा देती रही धूप में तू शजर से आबाद तो गए है रहना मेरा सर क्या नहीं तुझको अलमदार वफा इस मन को बखुदा तुझसे दारस भरी तू ना से चुनी आ गई शाम आलम लोगे अहले हरम रेत पर जली हुई हो गया ठंडा आलम पैसा देने के लिए मुझसे मैं के लिए आ गए बाबाली तू ना आया जब हृदा से चनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी क्या कहूँ शेर मेरे दाहम को लिए मुसलमान सारे शहर दर शहर गए खिले कूफा कभी खिलकत शाम कभी बारहा हम पे हंसी तू ना आया गाजी से चनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी कितनी बेबस थी बहन है शहंशाह वफा है नाम ले ले के मेरा जब ये जालिम कहा नाचता जिस पे तुझे बुलाओ ना उसे और मैं रोती रही तू ना आया से चुनी मैं सदा देती रही तू ना आया गाजी
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein. मेरे लाडले कहा मेरे माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। बेटा तुम्हारा कातिल मेरा मैंने कहा है, जाने क्यों हंस रहा है। चादर भी लुट चुकी है, मुंह किस तरह छुपाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। तेरे झूले को सकीना रो रो के चूमती है, तो घर की ढूंढती है। तेरी मौत की खबर मैं कैसे उसे सुनाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। मेरी जान जा रही है ये सोच सोच, असगर इस फूल से गले है। ये तीर कैसे झेला बहनों को क्या बताऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। नेज़े से गिर रहा है नन्ना सा सर तुम्हारा, दिल रोता है हमारा। मेरे हाथ तू बंधे, सर किस तरह उठाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। झूले के साथ बेटा मेरे हाथ जल गया है, जालिम भी हंस रहे हैं। तेरी आखिरी निशानी किस तरह से बचाऊं, असगर तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। जब रात होगी रन में हो जाएगा अंधेरा, डरना नहीं है बेटा, दादी कहेगी तुमसे आ मैं तुझे सुलाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ। तुम रात को हमेशा सुनते थे माँ से लोरी, अब नींद आती होगी फिर गोद में लिटा कर नादे अली सुनाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। आ जाओ चांद मेरे, तेरी प्यास मैं बुझाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, मेरे लाडले कहाँ हो, सीने तुम्हें लगाऊं, असगर में तेरी माँ हूँ। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन,
सल्ले अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद।
السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا نبي الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى أم المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا حسين بن علي المجتبى، السلام على أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي هلت بفنائك، عليكم مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر لحظة مني لسؤالتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيدي ومولاي أبا الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين وأختك زينب أم كلثوم وبنتك سكينة، جميع رحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن حسين زين العابدين، السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر، السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق، السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر القاسم، السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا، السلام عليك يا ابن علي الجواد، السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي، السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري، السلام عليك يا حجة بن حسن يا صاحب الأزر والزمان، السلام عليك يا خليل الرحمن، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا قائد الإيمان، السلام عليك يا إمام وإمام الإنس والجان، أجل سهورك أجل سهورك يا بن الحسن يا بن الحسن، أجل سهورك أجل سهورك. السلام عليكم جميع رحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك وجد الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه وجهك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى